to a second news item, and that's what I'm calling the slush fund for felons, and I'd like to call it some harsher things, and we're all outraged at this, and the idea that, gosh, we could be writing big fat checks with taxpayer dollars to people who not only assaulted police officers and vandalized the Capitol, but tried to stop a peaceful transition of power. And then some of them even reoffended, some who were convicted, some who pled guilty. But where do we stand legally on the hopes of challenging this?
Yeah, I think there is some hope. First, can I tell you a fun aside that I just learned?
I need fun.
The word slush fund, where does that come from? Do you know? I just read this. Slush in the old days of shipping was the extra like fat and grease left over after they cooked the meals. And slush was just fat, was of value to candle makers and others who needed this grease. And so they would go into the sailors would go into a port and sell off all this fat, all this grease, the slush. And then they would take the money and use it for their own stuff off the books, like booze, books, magazines, whatever it is they wanted to buy. But they used it.
So, ladies and gentlemen, you don't just get legal analysis on the Frank Figluzzi show. You get history. History is being discussed here. That's right.
It makes sense, right? So it's the stuff, it's off the books. Nobody's going to account for this. I can just use this money the way I want to. But, where does it stand legally? So first, I am absolutely convinced that if this case had stayed in court, it would have been dismissed by the judge. Donald Trump, certainly he did suffer. You're talking
about the IRS lawsuit, Trump suing his own IRS.
Yeah.
For a contractor releasing his tax.
Yes. Yeah. So, and that contractor, by the way, was charged criminally. It is not for nothing. Tax returns are supposed to be kept secret. Maybe he's got a claim for some money damages, but certainly not $10 billion worth. I mean, that's just laughable. No. His net worth has gone up exponentially since he's been in the White House. So can he trace any harm to it? I don't know. But, so he's got that. But you raised the point about suing his own Internal Revenue Service in his own Treasury Department, of which it is a part. The judge herself in this case had said, hey, I'm going to need briefs explaining how it is a court has jurisdiction over this as a genuine case or controversy, which is a requirement before a court may exercise jurisdiction. And 2 days before those briefs were due, Trump voluntarily dismisses the case. They knew where this was headed. It was going to get dismissed.
Yeah. He was going to lose.
She had also appointed amici court experts to weigh in, a former judge, some former DOJ officials, who said, not only does it appear that there is no adversity between the parties here. I mean, if you buy Trump's unitary executive theory, he is the executive branch, so he is suing himself. They said, it's very strange that DOJ has not raised some of the defenses it routinely raises in every case. First, the statute of limitations. This event occurred in 2019. The lawsuit was filed in 2016. I'm not great at math, Frank, but I think 26 minus 19 is more than 2. It's a 2-year statute of limitations.
Oh, wow.
And they didn't raise that, which is routine, right? This case should be dismissed because it was filed too late. The other, they did not raise at all the doctrine of sovereign immunity. The government enjoys immunity from being sued in civil cases with some very rare exceptions. Not asserted in this case. And then the third thing they pointed out was the one we mentioned initially, which is they did not argue that Trump failed to trace his $10 billion in his claim to any measurable, quantifiable losses. So all of those reasons say this case was doomed from the start. Nonetheless, they enter into this contract to resolve the case. Here are some other problems with the resolution. The Justice Department does sometimes resolve with plaintiffs who are out of court, either before they filed a suit or after they've been dismissed. Usually once a suit is filed, they stay in the court and the judge will oversee the settlement. But it seems, perhaps my suspicion is maybe that's exactly what they wanted to avoid here. So we'll dismiss the case and then we'll just have this out of court settlement. But the other problem is, according to DOJ's own policies, is if you're going to settle a case, you can even have benefits to third parties, although it is frowned upon. And Pam Bondi had issued a memo saying she was prohibiting third party beneficiaries to lawsuits. It should trace to the same claim that the lawsuit was based on. Trump filed a lawsuit for violations of the Privacy Act and the Internal Revenue Act. Now the settlement fund is for weaponization, whatever that is. Todd Blanche was asked what that is in front of Congress last week, and he said, whatever, we're open, any kind of weaponization is eligible. That's not a thing. Like, there's no statute that makes it a crime or a civil infraction to weaponize the law. So
when you use the word in defining the word, you're not defining the word.
Exactly. Weaponizing. And then the other thing that's really egregious, I think, is this cherry on top that gets filed the next day. Maybe they were hoping that they would sneak it past the media, who is focused on the outrage of the first day with the slush fund. And by the way, the IRS will stop its audits of Donald Trump for any claim that's ever been brought or could have been brought up to today forever. Again, not traceable to the Privacy Act claim or the the Internal Revenue claim for the release of his tax returns. This is something else entirely altogether different that has been, hounding Trump for decades. It's all off. Never mind. Forget about it. We're not going to worry about that anymore. So he gets these benefits that are completely divorced from his alleged grievance of this leak. So what about the challenge to it? We have seen some private individuals file challenges to this, like some of the officers,
couple of police officers
who were injured that day, who say that this will invite more retaliation against them, more threats against them, which they've already suffered. As sympathetic as I am to their cause, and I'm very sympathetic to their cause, I think they're unlikely to have legal standing to bring the suit. That's because you have to show that you have a direct and articulable harm based on the what has happened here. I think their harm here is going to be far too speculative in this case. Who I do think have standing to sue would be members of Congress. Now, it would have to be Congress as a body, and with the Republican Party controlling Congress, including both houses, I don't think they have standing, or I don't think they're likely to assert that standing right.
And Congress, because you're asserting that Congress has the power of the purse, they're supposed to come up with budget expenditure, and they've not been consulted on using taxpayer dollars in this manner.
Yes, I think that they would have standing to say, you have stepped on our power of the purse. We create this thing called the judgment fund, and we rely on you to exercise your duty to take care that the laws be faithfully executed, to dole out these funds in good faith, to resolve legal claims in the best interest of the United States. This convoluted two-headed monster, a lie built on a lie built on a lie, is no such thing. And so we are suing for, under the Administrative Procedure Act, under ultra vires, for your lack of power to do this. But I think that in light of the fact that the Republicans currently control both houses, it's unlikely. I mean, Trump has been really aggressive in asserting his power lately in running primary challengers against people who have crossed him. But all the more reason, I think, for voters to oust some of these Republicans from Congress, because if you can get a Democratic-controlled Congress, you have 2 to 3 years of a statute of limitations to bring one of these lawsuits. And in fact, a Congress controlled by Democrats could do something even more efficient, which is to enact legislation by a margin that is veto-proof to rescind these funds, to say you cannot use funds in this way. We have the power of the purse. We have this judgment fund. We are excluding from the judgment fund your slush fund because we find it to be unlawful. So I think the answer lies in voters electing people to Congress, and they have the opportunity to do that this November and replace some of these Trump-controlled MAGA Republicans with common sense. Even if you've got a common sense Republican Congress, either house I think would be sufficient to have standing to bring this suit. I think if you get both houses with a veto-proof majority, you could also enact legislation.
Well, there is some hope. I mean, they've got the week off because they went home. And part of the reason the Senate and the House went home was because they couldn't take this. This couldn't pass the smell test, this slush fund, and we're seeing cracks in the armor in the GOP in the Senate and in the House. So there's hope. But you are saying, just to clarify, that it would have to be the entire Congress signing off on this lawsuit against.
Yeah, and the majority rule. So you could have either house, but I think you would need the majority in favor of saying, yes, we are going to vote in favor of bringing this lawsuit.
What about you and me as taxpayers bringing an action? No,
it's a great question, but it's been tried and failed that taxpayers don't have standing to express disapproval with the way our taxpayer dollars are spent. Seems like we are suffering a real injury, right? I mean, we entrust these people to spend our dollars lawfully, and if it's not lawful, it seems like we should have standing. But that one has been pretty definitively resolved. The taxpayers don't generally have standing to attack misuse of funds.